Have you ever wondered how a move to another country could just ripple through the entire economy? I mean, there's what happens when thousands of people, just like you and me, move to a country? What effect does it have on the economy? Over the last decade, thousands of foreign relocations have transformed Portugal, boosting its tourism, real estate, and even its startup communities. And what effect does this have? Today we're diving into the untold story. Untold story. That sounds so dramatic. But it's how expats have actually reshaped Portugal and reshaped Portugal's economy and what it means for locals and newcomers alike. Because it's a big issue. It really is important. If you're considering relocating to Portugal, this is the impact that you could be a part of. And I feel it too, even though I moved 23 years ago, and I'm just talking about the last 10 years. So in recent history, Portugal has been pretty secular. And it's been because of the dictatorship that ended in 1974, it was definitely very kept away from the rest of the world. And not many people knew about it until recently. So this here is Monsanto, which is a beautiful village, and it represents the most Portuguese village in the whole of Portugal. And it's a stunning spot to visit, but I just thought it was a very apt background to start this story. So now 10 years ago, what has happened to Portugal in the last 10 years? My name's Nick Robinson. I've been living in Portugal for 23 years and I love it here. And let's have a look at what impact relocations have had on the country. So let's get into that historical context. So over the last 10 years, let's take you back to, actually it's a little bit more than 10 years. So in 2008, the great financial crisis rocked the world. And obviously Portugal, things happened here, but a little bit delayed. But the government was quick off the mark because in 2009, the Portuguese government introduced NHR, which is the non-habitual residency scheme. And essentially what this was if you hadn't been living in Portugal for the last 5 years, you could arrive. And if you qualified, you could get a 10% flat tax rate on all your income, as opposed to, normally it would be 48%. So it was a massive tax reduction. A lot of people flocked over here. They did adjust that to 20%, and then eventually they phased it out last year. And then in 2012, the Golden Visa program was launched, and it contributed 7 billion euros over the next 10 years or so. But let's just put that into context, because the GDP of Portugal is $260 billion euros per year, more or less. And so that 7 billion was over 10 years. I mean, still, it was a massive extra boon to the Portuguese economy, but it wasn't, if you put it in context, it's not a massive amount. But this together combined, and then social media got hold of it as well, and it just wouldn't let go. And this provided an incentive for the foreigners to come, and the trend just surged. Now suddenly Lisbon was full of tourists, Porto as well, Algarve also obviously an increase, but Lisbon was amazing. And I sat down with my family in Lisbon the other day, and I just said to them, what's life like in Lisbon? And they're like, wow, it's just so difficult to get anywhere because there's so much traffic, there's so many tourists. You walk into a restaurant these days and people ask you what you want in English first before asking you in Portuguese. So it feels a little bit like that's right in the center of Lisbon. Obviously, most Portuguese people live outside Lisbon in the greater Lisbon area, like either on the south bank of the river or on the, around the other areas to the north and to the west and to the northeast. So Portugal has experienced a radical economical turnaround from and tourism revenue. If you look at tourism revenue, it was about $9 billion euros a year, and it increased up to 25 billion euros a year. You can see the graph. Obviously, there's a COVID dip, but that's a big change in 10 years. Now, with regards to the foreign population, in 2013, there were 400,000 foreigners living in the country. Now there are 1 million. That's almost 10% of the entire population of Portugal. And those foreigners are primarily Brazilians, with 35%, and only 4.5% being British. Americans make up 1% of that, or 10,000 people. So it's undeniable that there is a large movement into the country, but there has been a large exodus too. So the Portuguese have emigrated at a rate of 70,000 per year since 2001. So in the last 10 years, that's almost 1 million people. The net result is a slight decline in population over the last decade, which is attributed to obviously immigration and other factors like low birth rates, etc. So that's the state of the nation. Okay, so we've given you a little bit of historical context. Now let's dig down deep into the ground, because this is what really matters. And a lot of people don't realize this, but when people come over here and buy a house in Portugal, foreigners, there's a massive, it's not massive, but I mean, there is an impact on the local economy. So, for example, guy buys a house down here next to me, here in Sabraj, buys a house for $500,000, which now these days is pretty normal. And he employs a gardener, he employs a pool guy, he employs a cleaner, and they go out to eat. The family goes out to eat for dinner. Maybe the kid's going to school, so they pay school fees. Obviously, if it's a government school, they don't pay school fees that much. But they contribute to the local economy. They buy a car here, they buy insurance, they pay taxes here. They do all these kind of things. And one house actually contributes quite a lot to the ongoing of the local economy. Now, obviously, when you look at places like Lisbon, and I've spoken to a lot of people in Lisbon who, I don't really get this. I mean, obviously the house prices have gone up a lot, and it's really, really tough for locals, and I completely sympathize with that. But at the end of the day, this is a natural progression when you develop stuff. I mean, okay, we've had an artificial input from Airbnb, so foreign investors go in and they buy houses and they just rent it out for exorbitant prices. And then the locals can't keep up. And that's, okay, because it's been accelerated, it's creating a house crisis right now. But in other places all around the world, there's a housing crisis in Ireland, there's a housing shortage in Amsterdam and the Holland and Dutch and the Netherlands, thank you. And it's just happening radically at the moment, but it's happened everywhere else over the last 50, 40, 100 years, depending on the development of the places. Like, for example, in New York, prices got really expensive in the middle of New York. So if you had lived there forever before, your prices would be going up. It makes sense, doesn't it? So I hope that this actually is a valid argument. Please, if you disagree with me, drop your disagreements with me in the comments, but keep it nice, please. We're all polite people here, aren't we? And let's talk about it, because I love to hear alternative points of view. And I may be completely wrong about this, but I honestly think that there's a positive aspect to a lot of the foreigners coming in. And also there's the other sort of unseen knowledge injection that comes with a lot of people involved in startups. A lot of retirees are consulting for local companies. There's a big thing in Lisbon. There's a big startup community in Lisbon. Lots of really, really cool businesses, and all locally operated and run. But there's a lot of collaboration with foreigners and collaboration with internationals. So it's an exciting new environment where we need this international cooperation, and that has been kickstarted by the government and by all these initiatives. So the government wanted foreign direct investment because most of the Portuguese were leaving, and this has balanced it out. Now it's become a problem. The government has realized that there's a housing crisis, and they are trying to fix the problem by putting in 2 billion euros and more into these low-cost housing developments. Unfortunately, they're not going as fast as planned, and they're not always hitting the right people. But that's a government management problem, but at least they're trying their best. So we really need to try and tighten up these projects. One accusation often leveled at the foreign population in Portugal is that we're creating a strain on the medical services. And to be honest, a lot of the foreigners who come in using private medical services are not using the free government medical services. And also, a lot of people think that the foreign population is old and retired. And actually, 80% of those million foreigners that are living in Portugal are of working age. So there is that thing. That's the thing. So I think some of those accusations are unfounded. One thing that is pretty true, though, is that generally, culturally, foreigners tend to isolate themselves and create bubbles. Like, you often find, old expats never willing to speak never willing to speak Portuguese, and they get their Sky TV on satellite, and then just lock themselves away in their houses and drink gin and tonics, smoke cigarettes at the local bars, and enjoy the local alcohol. And there's definitely a segment of society that does that. But there's another emerging section of society that really try and integrate. And I think the easiest way, or the most important way for people to integrate, is by learning the language. And I've learned the language. I'm not perfect, but I can get by. And you should too. I know so many people I speak to are looking at doing Portuguese lessons, which is great. Well, in conclusion, I think you can see that foreigners have had a lasting effect on the Portuguese economy. Not a massive one, but they have definitely played a role in creating new, exciting ideas. And Portugal has long been involved in international relations, from when they were in the 15th century, when they were populating the world and colonizing the world as well. So there's always been a lot of international exchange. It's coming from Africa, coming from Brazil, coming from Timor and East, and the Chinese influence coming from Macau. And so there's been a lot of international input into Portugal as a nation. And now we're getting another wave of relocations coming to Portugal and coming back to live here. So it's all swings and roundabouts, and it's been, as I said, it's been positive, and there's been negative impacts as well. So we need to work out how to do it. But as a foreigner wanting to relocate here, like me and like you maybe, then it's on you to actually integrate and to understand the Portuguese culture and to not sit in a bubble, to learn the language, to get involved in the culture, because the Portuguese are incredibly proud of their culture, and it's a wonderful culture. The food, the festivals, there's tons of them. Just go join in and embrace it. Don't look down on it. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to see what's going on in the comments, because it's going to be a little firefight. We'll see you later, and see you next week. Next week, we're actually trying to get back to getting the trips, because I remember I was telling you about using the Algarve as a base for different trips around Europe, and we did a trip up to the northern Spain. We've just gone to all right. Don't go away, hang around, like and subscribe and all the cool stuff, because it really helps. And this channel is like sort of stagnating a bit. So please get your friends in, like and subscribe and all that stuff. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye-bye. AlgarveAddicts.com. We'll see you next week. But if you need any help relocating to the Algarve, click through to our website, AlgarveAddicts.com. We offer tours, immigration assistance, long-term rentals, and we can buy your house.